Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everyone, I am honored to introduce my guest today, Vice Admiral Sandra Stosz, U.S. Coast Guard retired. Sandy started out in the U.S. Coast Guard as an ensign, serving aboard polar icebreakers, conducting national security missions from the Arctic to the Antarctic. Her 40-year career was filled with leadership lessons gleaned while breaking ice and breaking glass as the first woman to command an icebreaker on the Great Lakes and to lead a U.S. Armed Forces Service Academy. Along the way, Sandy served for 12 years at sea, commanding 2 ships, and led large Coast Guard organizations during times of crisis and complexity. She finished her career as the first woman assigned as Deputy Commandant for Mission Support, directing one of the Coast Guard's largest enterprises. She has lectured widely on leadership and has been featured on C-SPAN and other media outlets. In 2012, Newsweek's The Daily Beast named Sandy to their list of 150 women who shake the world. She volunteers in leadership roles for several organizations, including serving as a trustee for the Coast Guard Academy Institute for Leadership and as chair of the Coast Guard Academy Sailing Council. She is the author of Breaking Ice and Breaking Glass, Leading in Uncharted Waters. Please join me in welcoming Vice Admiral retired Sandy Stosz. Welcome, Sandy.
Thank you very much, Tammy. I'm honored to be here.
I am so happy to have you on Work from the Inside Out. And as you know, we like to begin with the early years. So take us back to some of those early years before you were leading people through the ice and breaking glass. and tell us about some of your beginnings.
All right, Tammy, you'll get the inside story then to go
right
with your podcast name. So I am all too happy to talk about the early years. And that is because I firmly believe that I was made by my core values that I learned in my younger years. So I was born and raised in Ellicott City, Maryland, born in 1960. I had 3 brothers. I was the oldest kid. Kids were 3 years and 10 months apart. So my mom was a homemaker and my dad was a chemical engineer. And we came from a modest family with the time being as I got into my early teenage years, the Great Recession of the early 70s with interest rates of 16%. So kind of challenging times, but it made us tough and resilient. And I learned, and my parents instilled in me, the core values of honesty and humility early on. And as I got a little older, I started working. It was expected. Lots was expected of us.
Oh, yeah.
My parents set high standards. They tolerated no dishonesty and kept us in our places, didn't want us to get too full of ourselves if we did well at something. They always kept us humble. And I went off to work then when I got to be a teenager because that was expected. And it was tough times in the 1970s.
I remember those days.
Yeah, you and I are about the same generation. So there weren't any easy jobs to have for teenagers. There was no free education hardly. You had to work for every penny, scrimp and save, to bring out that phrase. So I had a set of grandparents on my dad's side in Amherst, Massachusetts, which is farming country, right? I know you're in that basic area of Massachusetts. And I went up there and lived with my grandparents at the age of 13 and worked on a cucumber farm. And then in the next summers, I came up and worked on a tobacco farm, picking tobacco under these terribly hot tents, sweating my guts out, in like almost like a little military system, because the cigar company was migrant workers from Puerto Rico, juvenile delinquents that were brought up to put their hands into good use, and then some of us local kids. And we were separated, girls from boys, so very disciplined. And you had to make your quota every day, which is the required number of production units to get through.
Wow.
And you'd be fired, and nobody was going to feel sorry for you because you retired that day. And if you got more production than was required, you got a benefit called piecework over the quota. And so I learned from an early age to work hard, to persevere, and to do more than what was expected, because there was some reward in that. I guess, first of all, the reward was more money, but I felt good about myself that I could do better than the other girls, that I was maybe a step above, just in a way that I think is healthy competition, because I was not a competitive person, but I felt good about myself that I was able to go the extra mile and do more. And it helped develop my confidence, because despite what I said about being raised with 3 boys and my parents all treating us kids the same and me being a tomboy, I was the shyest tomboy you ever saw. I was shy and quiet. My personality is an introvert by definition. And so I needed ways to feel like I was competent. And so working hard and getting rewarded by doing more was good for my self-confidence. When I got a little bit older and entered high school, I entered high school in 1974. And 1972 was a seminal year for women. That was Title IX. In fact, just celebrated the 50th anniversary here in 2022, July 2022. And so when I got into high school, we had girls' sports teams that had an actual assigned coach. And I was athletic, having been raised with the boys. And another way for me to develop my confidence that I would need to go with my competence was on the sports field. So I feel really fortunate that I had these opportunities where, being born in 1960, I had opportunities that women born a few years older than me wouldn't have had. I had a chance to work hard, to persevere. My parents taught me honesty and humility. And my core values were those 4: hard work and perseverance, and honesty and humility. And I believe your core values are the foundation of your character. And your character defines who you are and who you're going to be. And if you don't get that right early on, it's hard. It's harder to become the leader of character that you want to be if you don't have a firm foundation in childhood. So I think childhood core values, character is so important. And the reason I wrote a book that's about leading with character is because there's lots of leaders in the world, good, bad, and ugly. And I think leading with character is really important to distinguish leaders from leaders who have character. And that's something that's all too rare in our society today. So my book emphasizes character-centered leadership.
I love it. I love it. I'm curious, what kind of sports did you play?
So before I even got into high school, I was on the community swim team. And in the small world category, my swim coach became my guidance counselor in high school. And then when I got into high school, I was on the track team and basketball.
Oh, wow.
So I was tall. And so those were 2 sports well suited for me.
When did you decide to join the military?
So that's the next part of the story. And it kind of flows from what I've already laid for a foundation. Yeah. In 1975, following on Title IX, following on the Equal Rights Amendment, Congress said, hey, when we appropriate funds for the Defense Department this year in 1975, we're going to require the military to open all their service academies to women. Up until then, they've been men only, if you can imagine that. So the Coast Guard Academy in New London, Connecticut, Kings Point and the Merchant Marine Academy in Kings Point, New York, West Point in West Point, New York, Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, and the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. And I was living in Ellicott City, Maryland. So one day in 1976, the year that law took place and all the academies had to open to women, it made the front page news of the Baltimore Sun. And my neighbor walks the paper, the Baltimore Sun, over to my mom saying, hey, Sandy might be interested in this new opportunity, given that she's a tomboy. The idea being that boys and men have gone to the Naval Academy, so a tomboy might be able to make it there. So I really did dig into that article, and it was like, wow. First of all, I kind of was intrigued by a new opportunity and the idea that I could see the world, be part of something bigger than myself, and free education. Wow. All these things kind of piled on, and I'm like, I'm going to apply. And it was a congressional nomination process for all those Department of Defense Armed Forces Service Academies. So I slogged through the congressional nomination with Senator Sarbanes in Maryland, where I was living, and got the nomination, but it was all political. You had to go and interview. And certainly if your mother knew somebody who knew Senator Sarbanes, you were better off. That was the rumor, at least. And then my guidance counselor said, who had been my swim coach, Sandy, you can't just put all your eggs in one basket. He said, take a look at this flyer I got in the mail from this place called the Coast Guard Academy in New London, Connecticut. So we poured over that flyer. And between the two of us, we said, well, the Coast Guard looks like a small Navy. And the Coast Guard is not a small Navy.
Right.
It is part of the Department of Homeland Security, not the Department of Defense, but we are one of the armed forces. And we do become part of the Navy in times of declared war, which hasn't happened since World War II. So we're an independent service, but we're in under a different title of the law. So we had a direct admission process at Coast Guard Academy. And I applied, and lo and behold, I got accepted pretty quickly. And meanwhile, I'm still slogging through this whole process at Naval Academy. So I said to myself, the letter came, my mother said, you should take a bird in hand when you got this offer from the Coast Guard Academy. And I'm like, yeah, I want to go to a school and join a service that values me for what I know, not who I know.
Ah, wow. That's amazing.
And so I said, yeah, I'm going to go where it's all about merit, where it's about what I can do, what I can prove, what I can, how well I can do something, not about who I know and my standing and my family's income level or whatever. So also the Coast Guard, unbeknownst to me at the time, because I was just young and naive, when they had opened the service academy and the service to women, the commandant, which is the service chief, which is equivalent to the chief executive officer, said, hey, we're going to open every field and specialty to the women. We're not going to exclude them from any positions like pointing into the spear jobs, going out to sea on our biggest ships, going into helicopters and airplanes. We're going to let them compete and get jobs wherever they want. Now, a caveat there was some of the ships, all the ships were challenged with birthing. Some could accommodate women officers, some could accommodate enlisted. But so it wasn't just open the door and everybody could go, but there were no exclusions on us, aside from the structural ones that the Coast Guard changed whenever they built new ships. They would make it so that you could have women's berthing. So I ended up being able to go as a Coast Guard officer onto a ship, and I was a cutterman and served 12 years at sea, serving on some ships that had weapon systems like the Navy's on them. So that was a great opportunity that I took, but really didn't have full understanding of what a impactful, momentous choice I was making at the time.
Really?
So when I did get to the academy, it was really hard. I mean, I was the third class of women, and there was 1,000 cadets in the Corps. Only 5% of us were women, and the attrition rate was atrocious for everybody. So it was a 50% attrition rate for all. And for women, though, it was higher. We had a 2/3 attrition rate. So my class came in with 30 women out of 312 people total. And we only graduated 10 women 4 years later. So it wasn't easy for women or men, but certainly we girls had a little more, to deal with. There was one class that didn't have any women in it. They were very proud of that. And a lot of the guys would look at us women and say, why do you want to be here? Any woman who's here is not a real woman. Whatever they meant by, they tried to kind of be condescending to you. Yeah. It's one of those little subtle ways of making you feel non-wanted.
Yeah.
So I never received any overt discrimination, but I received a lot of these subtle little cues that you're just not wanted, or many of us can relate to this, isolation, sometimes intended, sometimes not, but just you're isolated as the only woman. And that really makes you feel not included. So it was really hard. And I'll stop there and take a breather, but that's kind of my childhood, why I went to the academy, and a little bit about my experience there.
Oh, that's really helpful to hear. I'm curious, you said you served 12 years at sea. I'm envisioning you out on a ship for 12 years. I know you weren't out there the whole 12 years.
No. Not all at once.
So as you were going through that experience, the Coast Guard Academy and then serving at sea for 12 years, were you, I can imagine there may have been some experiences being, one of a handful of women in some cases where, you had to think twice at times about what would your role be, or what your future would look like? How could you grow? I mean, clearly we now know what happened. We know the end of the story, so to speak. But did you have aspirations to, become a vice admiral, or what were you thinking in those earlier years about what you wanted for yourself or your future?
Well, I'll be straight up honest. At the age of 18, when I started at the Coast Guard Academy, which is a 4-year college, by the way, a STEM college, you come out with an engineering, a BS degree. I had high aspirations, Tammy.
Yeah.
I wanted to graduate. So I came in as one of 312 people, all of us in the top of our class, all of us in charge of something, president of the class or captain of a sports team. So we all went from being exceptional in high school to being very average at the Coast Guard Academy, which was already a hard place to be with a high attrition rate. All I wanted to do was graduate.
Yeah.
And I wasn't academically gifted or well prepared. Even though I went to a good high school, I hadn't taken pre-calculus. And at the academy, we had to take Calc 1 and Calc 2. Being a non-math, I was a government major. So being a non-analytical person, just not in my blood or my DNA. Here I am with no calculus experience, having struggled mightily with algebra, and having to jump right into Calc 1 with people, some of them who had validated Calc 1. They were into multivariable calculus the first year at the academy. Here I am struggling with Calc 1. It sounds quotidian and ridiculous, but you got to pass. You got to make a 2.0 to graduate from the Coast Guard Academy. And I was like skimming along because physics is all calculus based. We weren't doing the fun physics where you touch the ball and the sparks come. We were doing the physics, the calculus based physics. Chemistry, oh my gosh, all those hard STEM courses. And it was hard and it was humbling. Luckily, I think it reinforced my core value of humility to see how average I was and how much I was going to have to work to graduate and to keep up with very gifted classmates and peers. So the hard work and perseverance, all those core values, they were my cornerstones for success. But my only goal was to graduate. And then when I did graduate, I wasn't even sure I'd stay in. You have a 5-year obligated service requirement for the free education. Mm-hmm. Nothing's free. There is no free lunch, they tell us in business.
That's right. That's right.
So I wasn't even sure if I was going to do my 5 years because the academy was hard. But, once I got out into the fleet and I went to the icebreaker and sailed to Antarctica, that's the first chapter of my book, I was just captivated by the adventure, just like I thought when I was back in high school and I was thinking about the Navy and seeing the world. So my whole time in the Coast Guard, though, I never had aspirations to advance up the ladder. I always had aspirations to do the best I could in the job I was in and to be the best person I could be. And I wasn't always seeing myself as a leader, because a lot of times in the younger years, even though I might have been leading something, I was still more of a team player at the junior levels. So trying to be a good teammate, to pull my fair share. I wasn't looking at where I could get ahead, because I think I had learned the humility lesson. And I always kept in the back of my mind that I was lucky just to be here and happy to get a good job and succeed in that job. See where the Coast Guard was going to send me next, succeed in that job. I just wasn't looking ahead to what might be at the end of the road somewhere.
Interesting. And yet, look how far you went.
All by chance a little bit, all by doing the right thing in the job I was in, and not by stroking for the next job.
Interesting. So after 12 years at sea, what was the pivot point there? How did that get, or actually, you did your 5 years. What made you decide to stay?
Well, the first 5 years was all at sea. The first 6 years was. And so I loved it. There was no thought in my mind of not staying. There was no action for me to take to stay. I didn't have to ask to stay on. It was automatic. You had to ask to leave. So I just stayed. And so there was no inflection point there, but I spent 12 years at sea, but not all at once. So those first 6 years were all at sea on 3 different ships. And then I did a staff job. I did another 2 years at sea, another staff job, another 2 years at sea, another staff job, 2 years at sea. So I had about 22 years in by the time I finished my last sea tour. And there was one more sea tour I could have gone for, a little bit bigger ship that I could have commanded. And it was an inflection point for me, because I was had gone further in my career than I'd ever gone. There had been a point in my career as a seagoing officer where I thought, if I could, it would be wonderful if I could be selected one day to be captain of a big ship. And I let myself think that was my goal and aspiration. And I think it was healthy to have goals like that, but I never stroked for it. I just said, hey, I'm going to have this goal. Maybe I can command a ship one day. And when I finished that, when I did get command of that bigger ship, I thought, well, I've met my career goals. I hadn't set any goals beyond that, because I felt like I was lucky to get that far, because it is competitive. And I had an inflection point, and I said, okay, what is it that I love about being at sea? And I thought I was going to say to myself, it must be, grabbing a cup of coffee and watching the stars at night, or all the adventure missions that we're doing out there, saving somebody's life. But it really wasn't. It was the people. So it was the ship being in port at the pier. And you work during the day on the ship, even when it's in port, you're doing maintenance. Yeah. So me as the captain of my last ship, I'd be standing up on the top on the bridge, pilot house, throughout the day, just looking down and seeing what's going on. And you'd see, we always have new people coming. So I'd see a recruit coming from boot camp. And this is a brand new Coast Guard person who's had 8 weeks of boot camp training in Cape May, New Jersey. And they know they're supposed to walk on board that ship. And the first thing they're supposed to do is salute the American flag. But a Coast Guard ship has a Union Jack, which is just the blue part on the front of the ship, and it's got a full national ensign on the back of the ship. And they're so nervous, they forget which end of the ship they're supposed to salute. They walk on that gangway, salute the wrong side. And so the person who's waiting for them to welcome them aboard welcomes them in a very rough way. And they get yelled at the first thing, and they're all, they don't know what they're doing. And anyway, a couple weeks later, you'll see that same young person who reported aboard unconfident, unsure of themselves, and he or she will be hauling on a line and yelling out a command with confidence. And I'm like, oh my gosh, watching those young people transition from young Americans out of high school or some college and becoming leaders, becoming more than they could have been without the Coast Guard. achieving their full potential, on their way to achieving their potential. That was so deeply rewarding to me. And I'm like, that's what it's all about. So I asked to command the Coast Guard's boot camp instead of going back to sea for a ship. And by the grace of God, I was assigned to be the captain of our Coast Guard Recruit Training Center, our boot camp in Cape May, New Jersey. And it was exactly where I was supposed to be at that point in my life. It was really hard to say no to the person in charge of the afloat cutter assignments because they wanted a woman to command a major cutter. And I told them no. And they're like, Sandy, what can we do to convince you to go back to sea again? I'm like, and so it was very hard to turn my back on my afloat community and ask to go to a shore job. But it was the shore job where I was training the next generation of young sailors. So I'm sorry to make this a long story, but it's a very passionate point for me. And I don't usually ask this question. So thank you for asking it.
Well, I also am thinking that it sounds like for the most part, you did what you were asked to do. And as you said, you did it with great humility and with pride. And this is something that talking about inside out, something was compelling you to do this. And so probably, for once in your life, so to speak, you said no to something and you said yes to something you felt you really needed. You were called to do it.
Right. And it was passion and purpose that drove me to that. And I think it's important for people to recognize that throughout their career, they can have inflection points and they should have the courage to explore those possibilities and to not stay with a comfort zone, to get a little bit uncomfortable, to push themselves to the next level, because they're going to be so satisfied by that. And everyone is pursuing happiness. It's even written into the Constitution, the happiness, pursuit of happiness. I've always looked at it as I want to pursue a long-standing, deep-seated sense of satisfaction and fulfillment, not temporary happiness. So I think I was able to maybe sense that. But it wasn't anything that was totally deliberate. I had to take a risk and leap of faith.
Absolutely.
So looking back, it's easy to say, oh, yeah, I came to this inflection point and I made this big decision. Yeah. No, it's hard. And I had to take a risk. I did not know how it was going to turn out. I didn't know if I'd get that job. Then I would have been thrown into the bucket of some kind of weird assignment that I might have gotten if I had turned down a ship assignment. So I had to take a risk to try to fulfill my sense of passion and purpose.
Yeah. And now you got me curious. Did you ever get any weird assignments?
Well,
or what you would consider what might have felt like a weird assignment to you?
No, but when I was a Coast Guard assignment officer, I assigned people to things that weren't necessarily in their career track or expertise. But I would counsel these people that I was assigning. They're like, but Sandy, I don't know anything about this specialty rate. And I'm like, I don't need you to have knowledge of marine safety protocols. I need you to lead a large organization and work with people in the port community. Use your personal power, your professional power to lead that organization. You'll have plenty of professionals who know the details of the job. Mm-hmm. So I was never really dropped into a job that was outside my specialty area necessarily, but I did assign a lot of people into those kind of jobs. And it really is a lot of a success in any job in life is all about leadership.
Yeah, I agree with you totally. I think that what you said, from a young age, I'm still really struck by the choice you made to go to the Coast Guard Academy because they chose you for what you know versus the Naval Academy for who you know. I mean, that was an amazing choice to make as a teenager.
Well, it was about merit. And I learned the value of that doing a little more than what was expected, working on tobacco farms, when I got paid to do a little more, produce more than the other girls were willing to do, you got rewarded for it. So always going a little bit beyond the expectation, I think, is kind of how I succeeded. When a lot of people were happy with meeting the status quo, which is hard enough in life.
Right.
It's like the status quo that you're supposed to meet, the quota you have to get every day, the 8 hours you put in the office and the assignments you have to do is easy. But if you go beyond what's expected,
Right.
people are going to notice. And that's how you stand out from the other people in the room. And so to me, merit matters, because I think that human nature people want to achieve their best. Not everybody, but I think a stroke of human nature is that we all want to be tested and tried and see how much we can achieve and how far we can go.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to do a little more if you're going to get there.
Right. Well, and I can imagine that over 40 years, that's a long career. You were tested probably more than once.
Oh, yeah. I was tested by Mother Nature. I was tested by subordinates, and I was tested by supervisors. I was tested every which way you can imagine.
Yeah. And
that was surprising. So I think in life, I didn't have any assignments that I landed in for 2 years or 3 years that were surprising, but I had circumstances that I encountered that were surprising. So just when you think you've seen it all, something new would come along that's like, oh my gosh. So you get used to dealing with an array of challenges that have no shape or form.
Yeah.
You can't just put a drill card. We call it a drill card in the military, where you write down everything that's going to happen and know how to respond. Like a fireman who comes to a house that's burning with a cooking fire has a certain list of things that go down. Here's how you deal with a cooking fire. I didn't have any cooking fires. I got the craziest kind of fires that had no instructions on how to put them out. You had to make up the instructions. You had to figure out how to navigate and solve the problem. And they were a lot of them. Well, I had some that were operational problems, Mother Nature, missions that needed to be worked. The harder problems were the people problems.
Right. I was just thinking that's probably true, because if you had, issues with Mother Nature or operational problems, you could put your head together with other people. Well, you probably could too with some of the people problems, but still, sometimes those things just show up right in your face and you've got to deal with them immediately, right?
Right. And they're not easy.
Yeah.
So there's easy people problems and there's not easy ones. So somebody comes into the office one day and they've broken their leg. Well, it's not that hard to put together a work schedule for them to be able to manage that for the time that it takes.
Right.
But then you have disgruntled employees they hate their job, but they're not going to leave either because they're making a nice paycheck, but they're going to make everybody's life miserable. And then you've got to start documenting the performance, holding them accountable, sitting down, looking them in the eye, having eye contact and saying you're not meeting expectations.
Yeah.
And very few people are willing to sit down and do that. They just hope the problem passes.
It's interesting, because being someone who hasn't served myself, it's easy to make assumptions that, don't you have hard and fast rules and people have to follow orders and people have to behave? And isn't it all just, follow the rules and it's straightforward, right? And everybody follows the code of ethics and honor and they just follow the behavior as it's prescribed, right? There's no problem.
That would be too easy.
Right. But I also realized that you probably also had outside contractors you had to deal with. Also, it wasn't just other members of the Coast Guard,
Right. It was certainly managing outside contractors. But even then there's specifications you can hold them accountable to, and you can have performance reviews with them. It takes a long time, though, all of it. None of it is you can just willy-nilly fire somebody. Yeah. On the active duty side of the military, it's much easier to hold people accountable to the written standards.
Yes. Yeah.
In fact, there's no excuse. The standard to walk past is the standard to accept, I think. But on the civilian side, I'm here to tell you, a lot of the civilians in the Coast Guard and the rest of the military are not only they're unionized and they're government employees, so you can't fire them.
Right.
So they're not just government employees, which already has a passel of protections, but they're a member of a government union. You almost can't let them go. And it's very difficult because morale in the office is usually rock bottom because you've got one person who's really bringing everyone down.
Well, and that happens. Yeah. I mean, that's where culture problems happen too.
Sure.
So, I know that you also went to the Kellogg School. Tell us a little bit about that.
I loved it. Kellogg School of Management in Evanston, Illinois. And I was so privileged to get into that school because I hadn't been the best student at the Coast Guard Academy. But I give it to the Kellogg School because they were looking for experience. So I'd been in the Coast Guard, captain of a ship. They were looking for the leadership. They could overlook my 2.7 GPA that I got coming out of the Coast Guard Academy. And I learned a couple of life lessons there. So as far as marketing analysis, regression analysis, all that stuff that's calculus based.
Yeah.
But what I learned was the marginal cost curve. And the marginal cost curve is a curve that goes up on a graph that shows that you can put a bunch of money into a product development and you can get a great product. And then you get to a certain point, like the 95% development level, where you've got a great product and you're at the top of the curve. If you want to get to 100% satisfaction, zero errors, 100% reliability, you can spend 3 or 4 times as much money to get an extra 1 or 2 or 3% value out of it. And a lot of people in the military are chasing that perfection, or I'd say anywhere in life, in work or in life. And they want it perfect before they'll make a decision, perfect before they'll act. And I took from the marginal cost curve, a marginal effort curve. Give me 85% of what I'm going to get, because I need to make a decision and get the ball rolling. And as George Patton said during World War II, he was one of the famous generals, a good decision executed today is far superior to a perfect decision executed 2 weeks from now when the battle's over.
Right.
So, I really think that I learned concepts at the Kellogg Business School more than strategic concepts more than tactical applications.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, when you did that, were you able to go full time doing that? Were you?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So I'll make a tiny story out of this, and it's all about motivation and lifelong learning. So my mother-in-law asked me one day, Sandy, what motivated you to stay in the Coast Guard for 40 years? Well, nobody had ever said that to me. They'd said to me, Sandy, why did you stay in the Coast Guard for 40 years? What kept you going? And I'm like, well, perseverance. That's one of my core values. But when my mother-in-law asked me what motivated me, it stumped me. And so I thought on my feet and said, you know what? It was the opportunities for lifelong learning the Coast Guard gave me that motivated me at this level, motivated me at the next level. The Coast Guard sent me as a young lieutenant, so at the age of 30, mid-grade officer, coming off of command of the icebreaker Katmai Bay in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. They sent me down to 2 full years, paid, all expenses paid, free tuition at the Kellogg Business School. I applied for it and I got accepted to the program. And you never seen a more loyal Coast Guard member after that. And I owed obligated service, right? I owed 4 years for that 2 years of free education. Nothing's free.
Right.
But I'm like, okay, I love the Coast Guard.
Yeah.
Give me 4 more. The Coast Guard motivated me by giving me opportunities for lifelong learning to continue my growth, not just professionally at the next level of command, but educational and intellectual growth.
Yeah. And you were able to then take that learning and apply it directly, right?
Sure. It made me a better leader.
Yeah. Yeah.
A better decision maker, a better judgment, better empathy, all these things that make a good leader.
Yeah. So now, you also, somewhere along the way, you got married.
Yes, I got married at the age of 47 for the first time. I had been at sea for 12 years. My husband had been at sea for 14 years. He was a Coast Guard guy too. We got married when he retired, and we were both the same age, and we had both felt comfortable with Coast Guard families. So you're at sea, you have a really tight Coast Guard crew.
Yeah.
And so I felt like the Coast Guard was my family, and I was deeply satisfied. I had lots of friends, lots of colleagues. And then my two brothers both gave me nieces and nephews. So generously gave me 3 nieces who were lovely young women, and one brother gave me 2 nephews who are wonderful young men. And when I was superintendent,
best of everything, it sounds like.
Oh, better yet, when I became superintendent at the Coast Guard Academy, that's the equivalent to president. My alma mater. I came back as the first woman to lead any U.S. Armed Forces Service Academy. I had 1,000 cadets, and I would tell parents when they were dropping their kids off, when I had a time in the auditorium to dress all the parents and let them know what to expect. I said, "Look, I don't have kids of my own. I have 1,000 kids here. Your child that you've dropped off today, I'm going to treat that child as one of my own. I see myself as having 1,000 young people who are my kids who I'm responsible for, just like you parents would be responsible for them."
Wow.
And I thought I was kind of being light and humorous when I said that. But afterwards, I had parents swamping me. We feel so good about our decision to send our daughter or son to the Coast Guard Academy because of what you just said. I had no idea it would have that impact on parents, but I did see those young cadets as my family. And so I think God had a plan for me, and I didn't ever have a drive to have kids. And I know a lot of people look at me and say, "Well, you never had kids, so sure, it was easy for you to make Admiral." I'm like, let them say it. I mean, we all make our choices. And
I don't think there's anything easy about making Admiral.
I faced a lot of, I faced more discrimination from women than men in my career. There'd be other women who would say things like that. Yeah, well, no wonder you've gotten so far. You never had kids. You're selfish. You never, got married and had kids. So of course it's easy for you. And I'm like, how can people be so competitive and vindictive? I'm like, why can't we all respect each other's choices?
Yeah. And they don't even know what your choices were exactly. They just know that you ended up becoming an admiral. They don't know what choices you made along the way.
Right. And why should my choices be judged by somebody else? But that being judged from a young age helped me to declare to myself, I will never judge. Well, I would try. I fell short. I try so hard to be a good leader. I fall short. But I said to myself, I will never judge people if I can help it, because I've been judged so much just for who I am, just for being a single woman or whatever, and women are judging each other. I'd have young cadets come up to me and say, "Ma'am, when I was superintendent, ma'am, we're kind of worried. We're being told we can have it all. We can do everything. We can be parents. We can be on the PTA at school. We can make it to Admiral. We can cook every meal. We just don't see it." And I'm like, so I came up with an analogy called the menu analogy. It's in my book. And other people have taken that little concept and called it the buffet analogy. But you go to a restaurant, you go to a buffet, you cannot have it all at once.
Right.
And you might be able to keep going back to the buffet and trying different things, filling up 3 different plates over the course of 3 hours. Or the restaurant, you come back every week for a year, you can try everything. Right. But the one day you go to the restaurant, you sit down, you have to order one thing off the menu because you couldn't pay for the whole menu. Your stomach couldn't fit the whole menu. You probably don't even like everything on the menu.
Right.
Maybe you want to save room for dessert.
Right.
So I am not a fan of this forcing function of every young woman should be told she can have it all.
Well, yeah. I mean, men don't have it all.
They don't get judged that way.
Right. So it's very interesting. Very interesting.
It's an interesting concept. And so I would tell young women, look, you can have anything you want, but not everything you want. And you get the privilege of deciding what success looks like to you. That's and right. What having it all means to you.
That's right.
And that might mean something entirely different than having it all means to your friend next door. But it's your choice, your decision. Don't let anyone bully you into thinking you should be doing more.
Well, and that's an interesting, we could have a whole episode just on this whole notion of having it all, because, when I think about the way I crafted my life and my career, I feel like I did have it all, but that's because of being able to be self-employed and work from home and make my own schedule and have a child and be married and do all of those things. But it took creativity to make that happen in that way. And I found a career that I really loved, and I made it work and I made it happen. But it was, I had it all in the way I wanted it. It wouldn't have worked for someone else. It wouldn't have been somebody else's all. So, everybody, like you said, everyone has their own idea of what success is or what it's meant to be. And it changes over time too. What you think you want when you're in your 20s. That's why I think it's crazy sometimes kids at 18 going off to college. I think it would be great if they maybe waited even a year and then made a decision. Because I think for some kids, they should maybe go work for a year, see what it's like to just take, be accountable, take some responsibility. Not that some kids aren't already, and then make some choices. Because why would we expect anybody at that point in their lives to know what they want? And so I think that there's a lot of things that we somehow think we're supposed to know by a certain point in our lives, or that we expect that certain things will happen at certain benchmarks. And that's what I really appreciate about your story, about your book, that you got married at 47. You met the right person at the right time in your life. You had a full life already. That was your life. That's what worked for you. And, our listeners can just hear us. I'm looking at you because we're on video, and I'm seeing how you just are still beaming with pride and positivity about this life and this experience that you had, that I know was full of challenges all along the way, and yet was also something that you feel great about. And, thinking about all the lives that you've impacted, all the people who, are going forward under, from having had your leadership and what they've carried forward. I'm curious, what is it that you hope that those people who are still serving today, what is it that you hope they're carrying forward, having had you as their leader?
There's a lot of challenges that people who are still in the Coast Guard or any organization are facing. And I've been retired 4 years now. And yes, there are plenty of people, and I meet them or talk with them most every day, who are still carrying the water in service to our nation in the U.S. Coast Guard, facing different challenges than I had to face. We all have different challenges, and we don't know what the next challenge will look like. And I think we have to be ready to face those challenges, not having an instruction card for them, like I talked about earlier. So who had an instruction card for how you handle COVID?
Right.
Had to make that up as they went, and like the rest of the world. So I hope that I've left young leaders at all levels who subscribe to what I call the 4 A's. You anticipate what might be coming over the horizon next, knowing that something's coming, knowing that your comfort zone is going to be shattered any day when it's least expected. Anticipate what might be coming. Look at what the customer needs might change. Look at the environmental scan. Adapt to whatever comes. Adjust everybody's expectations, and be agile so that you can just be able to respond on your feet like a boxer on their toes, not caught flat-footed. So anticipate, adapt, adjust, and be agile. And there's a lot. I've got a whole little formula for each of those.
Yeah.
Just came to me to give you that little leadership nugget. Is what I hope one thing is that I can leave with people is that agility to anticipate and be ready for what's going to come next. Because as leaders, we're going to face that more and more in this ever-changing world.
Yes, we are. I think the other thing I wanted to comment on was that there's a section in your book where you also talk about getting inclusion right. Because I think, thinking about your own story was all about inclusion. Thinking about how you were one of the first women to go into the Coast Guard and one of the first women to take on such a high leadership role. And all the different scenarios of inclusion as we talk about it today, that how important that is and how our leaders really need to understand what that really means. So I really was delighted to see that in your book.
Yeah, I really felt driven and passionate about including that. And I thought long and hard I had 3 parts to my book. And the middle part is one where I do address how to get diversity, equity, and inclusion right. And I have a success pyramid that starts out with access. The bottom floor is access. I talked about Title IX, gave me as a young girl access that women 3 years older than me didn't have.
Right.
And the next section is diversity, equity, and inclusion. You've got to have policies and programs that take those newly arrived people and accommodate them. So the societal level, then there's the organizational level, but there's an individual level at the top of the pyramid, which is how you choose to fit in. And there might be many things that you as a minority or a woman or somebody different in any way might not be able to control about your environment, but you can control how you react. You have total control over what you think, how you react, how you respond, how you choose to let these challenges impact you. And you can choose to fall victim to them and have a victim mentality, or you can choose to overcome them and prove people wrong. Mm-hmm. And me being a stubborn German descended person decided, even though I was shy and quiet, I had a very quiet stubbornness about me where I wasn't going to have someone tell me, you can't make it here because you're a girl. I'm like, ha ha ha. Ask my parents. If you, even though I'm quiet and shy, if you tell me I can't do something, I will shyly and quietly do it and come back a day or a week or a year later, and you'll have to swallow your prediction because I will have gotten it done. By golly.
I think there's probably a few people out there who can say that you showed them. If people want to follow what you're doing, I know that you do quite a bit of speaking, and if they want to find your book, where's the best place for them to follow you?
Well, the best place to get me is on my website, which is www.sandrastosz.com. I've got a tab for my book, Breaking Ice and Breaking Glass, Leading in Uncharted Waters. And you can order it from any bookstore. You can order it from Amazon. I like to support independent bookstores. Also on my website, you can get my mailing. You can sign up to be on my mailing list, which will get you every 2 weeks, my Leading with Character blog. And so you get a leadership nugget every 2 weeks.
Nice.
Like a couple hundred of them in my on my website from the past that I've been doing. And another way to get me is on LinkedIn. That's where I'm most active. I like that professional network. So they can follow me or connect with me on LinkedIn. And Sandra Stosz, there's only one of me out there. It's not like you have somebody whose name is common. So just get me there. And I think that's about it. But I encourage everyone to sign up for my blog and get a copy of the book. And all the proceeds from the book are donated to the Coast Guard Academy. My publisher cuts my royalty checks directly to the Academy's 501c3 arm, which is the Alumni Association.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And it goes into developing the next generation of leaders.
Love it. I love it. Well, Sandy, all of that will be in the show notes, so people will have no trouble finding you and finding all the good things that you're doing. One last question. If you were to give somebody one piece of advice about making a transition in their life to whatever's next for them, what would be one key piece of advice you would give them?
I guess I've got a mantra that I will leave you with, because there's lots of answers that you can come up with for that question. It's a great question, but be bold. And that means reach high, set goals, believe in yourself and others. A lot of people don't get that part. They set goals and they wonder why they never achieve them. It's because they didn't believe in themselves or believe in other people that they're leading or who are their peers. And it's a team effort a lot of times. So be bold, reach high, believe in yourself and others, and become the leader of character you're meant to be in whatever your chosen walk of life is. So there's some risk, and you've got to step off that gangplank into the roiling sea, and presume that you're going to swim, with a life jacket, and you're going to get ashore and go on to become all you can be. So believe, be bold, believe, and become.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. This has been a delight.
Yes, it has.
Today, it's been an honor. Thank you again for your service.
You're welcome.
I look forward to more conversations at some point.
Me too. It's an honor to be here, Tammy. Thank you so much for interviewing me. I'm happy with a chance to share my leadership lessons.
Oh, thank you.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Sandy Stosz. It was so interesting to speak with her and learn about her background and professional transitions. What is your key takeaway from our interview? If you are interested in any of the resources mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them in the show notes on my website at tammygoulerloeb.com/podcast. Just look for episode 186. Are you anticipating your next professional move? Check out my award-winning book, Work from the Inside Out, Break Through 9 Common Obstacles and Design a Career That Fulfills You. It's available in print and ebook editions through my website, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, independent bookstores, or through your local library. If you were inspired by this episode with Sandy, please share it with your friends and colleagues. And please do subscribe so you don't miss next week's show. Remember, subscribing is always free. Are you enjoying the podcast? It would be so helpful if you would write a quick review on Apple Podcasts. It's easy to find through my website at tammygoulerloeb.com/podcast. Just click on the Apple Podcast button and follow the instructions provided there. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. I'd love to hear from you. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.